Hello, my name is Maddison and I'm here to present my version of an environmentally sustainable home for the Chesapeake region. First things first, you're probably wondering why I have a recipe for crab cakes pulled up. So, crab cakes are one of my favorite dishes, and I found that the best crab cakes can be eaten around the Chesapeake Bay. So, most of the time, let me get this pulled up. Most of these crab cakes are made with the blue crab, which I have pictured here, and they're a really common crab throughout the Chesapeake Bay. So the blue crab lives around the wetlands of the Chesapeake Bay, which are a major part of the larger bay itself. They act as a filtration source for the Chesapeake watershed, which is one of the biggest watersheds in the United States, and it's pictured right here. The Chesapeake watershed flows through 6 different states: Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, New York, and Virginia itself, not to mention all of Washington, D.C., pictured right here. All these states feed into the Chesapeake Bay through this watershed. Now, the Chesapeake Bay is a gorgeous estuary with very popular beaches, like Virginia Beach, which is right down here. Biologically active wetlands, which act as a filter between the saltwater and freshwater biomes, which you can see here, and typically there's some tree coverage around these wetlands as well, where you'll see things like red maple, evergreens, types of trees like that can handle the tides and the rising water tables. And then types of wetland islands that you can consider are the Assateague and Chincoteague Islands. And then you have historical sites like lighthouses and major cities including Washington, D.C. So remember how we talked about this watershed over here. So since it flows through 6 different states, pictured down here, and in these 6 states it flows through major cities with lots of people, which means lots of pollution. And here's a demonstration of pollution in these wetlands. A lot of runoff ends up in the Chesapeake Bay itself, and further human interaction with the Chesapeake Bay can include erosion from construction or the removal of natural grasses which hold the sand together. And a lot of this runoff entails nutrition surplus, which causes things like algae blooms, sediments, most of which come off of agricultural fields and mess with the balance of the wetlands, and garbage, which clogs up the wetlands, gets eaten by wildlife such as the blue crab and can eventually end up at sea. So here we have a 1987 satellite shot of the Chesapeake. So agricultural fields are in tan, woodlands are in green, so over here, and then we have wetlands in red-brown, and urban areas in steel blue. As you can see here, we have a lot of sediment coming off into the bay itself, which will eventually flow out to the Atlantic Ocean. And a lot of this sediment and this pollution that's coming from upriver is coming from around industrial areas. So everything that gets dumped up here and up here gets followed through to the bay, and it affects the wetlands, which are a major part of the bay. On top of all of this, people living in the Chesapeake pull on the freshwater aquifers for water sources. When a lot of people pull on one aquifer near a saltwater system, the depleted freshwater allows for saltwater to leach in. This compromises the integrity of the aquifer, which depletes the freshwater available to the Chesapeake's growing populations. So as you can see here in a watershed stream health map from 2010, a lot of the stream healths are ranked poor or very poor around the bay itself, and then in the urban areas in the watershed. And this is because a lot of people are there, a lot of people are pulling on these watersheds, and there's pollution happening from that sort of lifestyle. So as you can see, the water stream health, especially around the Chesapeake, is ranked poor or very poor. This is made evident through the sediments, which we see here, nutrients and garbage that make their way into the Chesapeake through the streams. This means that available fresh water for human use is not as widespread, and ecosystems existing in said freshwater areas are unable to function properly. Overall, my eco-house must take into special consideration the amount of water used and how much untreated water is released back into the Chesapeake. So where there's water pollution, there's air pollution. And the Chesapeake is no exception to this rule. Pictured here is an air quality index observations for the past year, with recordings taken in September, November, February, and May. Overall, the air quality for the Chesapeake Bay remains moderate, as you can see here. And they have peaks during hot months and during rush hours during the day. So if you were to watch the air quality videos from throughout an entire day, you'll see how the air quality definitely goes down or goes up. The air quality itself goes down during rush hour. Overall, the moderate levels of Virginia remain steady around the bay. As you can see, most of the Virginia will come and go as far as air levels throughout the entire state, but the Chesapeake remains fairly steady and having the yellow ring here moderate. So this suggests that the bay experiences air pollution at a steadier rate than the rest of Virginia. Wind off the bay also has an effect on the air quality, as stormy air currents during hurricane season can keep the air moving, thusly changing the air quality from day to day. So I brought up how hurricane season on the bay can bring strong winds, but the common winds of the bay have the possibility of powering wind turbines, which act as an alternative energy source. In data collected in the Newport News region, demonstrated down here, I calculated that over a 6-day period, and demonstrated here in this data, we see the angle and we were able to calculate the wind speed. The wind had a 50% chance of creating electricity and at a sustainable rate. So this means that for our eco-house in the Chesapeake, that while wind energy isn't a viable main energy resource, it's a viable backup energy source. So let me just switch to a new demonstration for you. So I want to show you this infographic on energy resources present in the Chesapeake. So 3 types of renewable energy that the Chesapeake House would be able to utilize are ocean, biofuel, and solar energies. Ocean energy uses the force of the tide. So here you see how it uses the force of the tide to generate energy and is comparable in cost to natural gas and oil, and you can read on that here. This energy is good for widespread distribution and can largely be used over a complete town. Next up we have algae biofuel, which can be used to combat the algae blooms present from the surplus nutrients that leach into the bay. This energy is definitely more expensive than fossil fuels, costing at about $3 a barrel, or $150 a barrel. However, they can use the Chesapeake Didymo and lettuce algae to sustain the biofuel as well. This energy obviously is more expensive, but it can be a sustainable source for an individual home, especially if the individual home is producing and treating its own algae biofuel. And finally, we have solar energy, and we have thermal and photovoltaic. So this solar energy can be a major source of energy in the Chesapeake, and because the tree coverage tends to break up around the beach, as you saw when I showed the picture of the wetlands with the tree coverage. The Chesapeake has this opportunity to take on sunlight. By using solar panels for electricity and water heating, and this is a solar panel operated water heater. It's typically very small. You use it for a smaller house, and it's positioned on top of the roof. This eco-house can cut down on fossil fuel usage significantly. So while the cost for installing solar energy is typically very high initially, as long as upkeep is maintained, these solar panels can last for quite a while. So let me switch over again to a demonstration on the home and the prototype about what's going to be used. So this is the original picture that I used as sort of a model, which I will show you what the actual eco-house looks like in a minute. But here's a list of materials that I use. So I have a solar water heater, red maple flooring, because red maple is a native tree to the Chesapeake, so that means we would have to transfer wood a lot less distance, and it would provide jobs within the area. And then we have a 12-panel solar system. We have metal roofs to prevent runoff, because shingles have little particles that can run off and get caught up in the groundwater. And like I mentioned earlier, this house wants to prevent as much water pollution as possible. So using a metal roof, you have a one-time installation that can last for significantly longer than a shingles roof. And with maintaining, it can also, the heat produced by the metal house can also help regulate the heat within the house, so less heat will have to be used. Wide windows and glass doors to allow natural heating and light in. The blue paint attracts light, and then that helps feed the solar panels, which cuts down on energy usage. Then landscape. With this house, I didn't focus so much on xeriscaping, but in my eco house that I designed, there's a little bit of xeriscaping, but I also wanted to focus on reintroducing natural habitats that are being lost. So I wanted to use natural grasses such as dune grass, bushy blue stem, broom's edge, and also reintroduce dunes to encourage dune dwelling. So you have things like turtles, types of crabs that live in these dunes. We want to introduce those dune wildlife back in. And then further on, we have gutters that collect rain, and they're connected to rain barrels, which can supplement water usage in the home. Again, cutting down on water usage and water pollution. And then in the back, I will have present a small wind turbine to collect energy part-time for the home when our water usage and our solar panels are no longer working. So these are some of the materials that we're using. So for the roof, we're going to need aluminum, paint, zinc, steel, and that's going to require some mining and fossil fuels in order to produce. And we can get this within the Chesapeake region. We can use recycled materials for the roofing. We can, but however, there are going to be fuels burned to transport the materials, and the production fuels for the construction materials are also going to add up. You have installation risk for workers, but there is wash-off reduction, and replacing the roof reduces significantly, and it also provides jobs for local construction workers. And for the flooring, all throughout the house and the deck, we have red maple. You need wood, sealant, red maple planks, fossil fuels. And to transport the wood and from the wood lot and sealant from the factory, you would need to use fossil fuels. However, the transportation will be significantly less because red maple is present within the Chesapeake. So we do run a risk of deforestation, but with replanting and selective cutting, that cuts down on that risk. Then we have fuels for the cutting itself, but then that provides jobs for local carpenters, and local wood means it can be more sustainable, again, with selective cutting and replanting. And for the solar panels and the solar heating, monoxidillion, polysilicon, or thin film, we're going to need metal, plastic, and glass, and silicon, and copper, cadmium, fossil fuels, and those are all going to require mining. And they have to be transported from specialized solar panel companies, which there are those present within the Chesapeake, but it may also require us to transfer from a farther area. And this promotes development in solar energy, which is an awesome social impact because it encourages so many other people to get involved, and it also lowers the cost for others. However, it is expensive, but it is a renewable energy source, and it lowers actual energy bills, which encourages people to invest in it. Finally, we have the landscape with dune grass, bushy blue stem, broom's edge, and then also sand to reintroduce this false dune. And then we're going to need soil and local flora. So we're pretty much just transferring from local nurseries to the house. And that allows replenishing for local grasses, which those sources are decreasing, which is so important. In order to promote water quality, we need those natural filtration systems that these grasses provide. And this also encourages local flora and fauna to grow and to live in the area surrounding the house, which with this habitat reinstallation we want. Finally, with the paint, we're going to need pigment, binder, clay, a carrier, and that also includes latex, titanium dioxide, and oil. So that's going to have to come from the hardware store to the house itself. But this reduces the need for heating and cooling, but however, it does have potential chemical wash-off. And the expense will go up with house size, but it gives jobs to local workers. So here we have a kind of webs that I've designed to kind of show the impact of different variations. So here we have things I was explaining earlier. With the solar panels, we have hazardous material usage. However, we do have STEM development. With factory construction, there comes habitat destruction, but solar panel development also, in the development, fossil fuels will have to be burned. However, this reduces electricity bills, also reduces dependence on fossil fuels itself. With the roof, we're going to need aluminum, which is potential for chemical runoff. We will have to mine, again, habitat destruction, risk for contractors and installation as well. However, we can use recycled materials, and then that causes an extended roof life. So the red maple, which is the one I'm going to discuss the most, provides jobs for foresters. And these fossil fuels are burned to transport. However, because it's natural wood from the local habitat, it's sustainable with selective cutting and reforestation. So they provide aesthetic purposes. They make life generally easier to live. The cost is the biggest impact on the consumer for this house, because this house does utilize a lot of expensive installing processes in order to create the house itself. The cost will eventually save for the consumer in the long run, but initially it will be very, very expensive. So we have a lot of social impacts. We'll focus on deurbanization. So those areas needed for the forest space are kept forested, which is what we want to encourage. We want to encourage this habitat restoration. And this means there's job security for local milleries, carpentry, and then we have the transportation. The purchase of fuel and transportation methods boosts the local economy, and the price of the flooring also encourages specialty woods to continue to be used because it's considered a specialty wood. The wood pulp would have to be disposed of properly in this case, and it can clog up waterways and disrupt soil balances, which is what we're trying to combat, especially with the wetlands of the local area, because how important they are to the Chesapeake. The sealant applied to the wood has to keep it from warping, but chemical wash-off can occur. However, if warping happens, that means we have to cut down more trees to provide more planks. So, without further ado, I should, let me get the Eco House pulled up. So this is the Eco House itself. Let me scroll in so you guys can get a better view. So let's start with a tour of the front yard, shall we? So here we have the reintroduction of a dunescape, which we want to bring in for the natural flora and fauna again with the grasses. And then we have replanting of the red maple to kind of replace what we've used in the front porch and within the insulation. Here we have a clothesline. This house doesn't have a dryer. We want to reduce on how much energy we're actually using. So if we can use winds-free, people, and it doesn't cause environmental risks. So cut down on those uses. Dry your clothes outside. So over here, I've installed a pond. Now, the algae produced in the pond can be used to produce algae biofuel, which I've created a machine over here that will help produce that, the processing in order to power the house. But it also encourages migrating birds, local, like smaller fish and things like that are present within the Chesapeake to come return, because they now have wetland area that I've created in the front yard where they can come back. So you have ducks, geese, things that normally travel north and south have a place to stop, and they have reason to stop again in the Chesapeake itself in order to encourage that growth. So over here we have garden boxes, because with this house we want to encourage as much self-sustainability as possible. So we have fruit trees, we have every plant that is present in this house can be used, which is the biggest thing. And then over here, this entire front lawn all the way up and all the way back is gravel. Gravel is permeable, which means water can get back into the ground, which is what we want. If I had laid asphalt, water wouldn't be able to get back in the ground as easily. So instead we've put gravel, which the water can get through. And it also acts as a filtration source. The larger rocks and then the clay beneath make sure pollutants don't get off as easily. So over here, I have a gray water collection. So gray water is typically what is produced like when you wash your hands, when you do laundry and things like that. And all of this can be used to water the garden boxes, to keep the front yard with the dune grass, although the different grasses, the native flora and fauna, won't need as much water. The gray water can be utilized. And then, sorry, pardon me. Over here, we have our wind turbine. So the wind turbine is a supplementary source, and we have our windsock and everything to indicate the speed of the wind. So when the solar panels that are on top aren't working, we can use the wind turbine to supplement that energy. So we have two sources of the photovoltaic cells, and then we have a thermal energy, which can be used to heat the water. So we have a water heater over there. So I've created an aspect of xeriscaping right here with this, this deck. So we have vines and green space growing, and then we also have planted usable plants, so you can do things like herbs, local grass, things like that. Here are water barrels. You have one over here and one over here. And the biggest, one of the biggest things about this house are the sliding glass doors. So these sliding glass doors can open, allowing wind currents to come in, which reduces on the need for heating and cooling. So that's one less energy source we're using. I've also elevated the house off the ground, so the house isn't built directly into the ground, which means less disturbance has to happen. Obviously, a foundation needs to be laid, but the house itself won't be disturbing the ground as much. So these hurt, and then over here, this is the garage / greenhouse. So this garage this is galvanized right here. You can use this as a garage, but this glass panel here, it's a sliding glass door that can be pulled out to turn this into a greenhouse. So you can use this to develop the interior and to encourage plant growth and things like that. You can also use it to control the heat in the house as well by providing that. And again, we have the side paneling that's painted blue to encourage the collection of light within the house itself. So that is the eco house in and of itself. Sorry, I'm still learning how to use this thing. So this is the Chesapeake eco house that I've planned out. Although it's going to be a little pricey to build, honestly, it's worth it because in the long run, you're saving so much money. You've created self-sustainability. Not only are you saving on energy, heck, you're saving on groceries, you're saving on laundry, and you're also reintroducing natural habitat that's present in the Chesapeake. And you're able to encourage the growth of new self-sustainable and renewable resources. So we have solar, we have algae biofuel, and things like that we want to encourage our STEM areas to develop, and we want to encourage these things in these houses. If you find yourself interested in helping out the Chesapeake and seeing what's going on over in the Chesapeake, take a look at these sources that I used in order to kind of figure out my own eco house and to figure out more about the Chesapeake. They detail on current cleanup efforts, environmental data, and things you can do around the Chesapeake in order to ensure that this estuary is preserved, as the current funding for Chesapeake cleanup is on the line with the new governmental budget. How you can get in contact with your local lawmakers to ensure this remains an important issue. So thank you for watching.